Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. Brazil's Justice Minister Sergio Moro has answered questions in front of the Senate's Justice Commission in relation to the Lava Jato probe. This hearing comes as news outlet The Intercept revealed through leaked audios and messages that then Judge Moro allegedly worked in tandem with the Lava Jato team to prevent former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva from running in the 2018 presidential election. This included giving them direct orders during Lula's trial while he was a presiding judge. During the hearing, Moro said he was the real victim as his conversations were illegally recorded, adding that a well-structured criminal gang was behind the leaks. Our correspondent Brian Muir has more from Sao Paulo.
This morning, Brazilian Federal Justice Minister Sergio Moro is addressing the Senate. He was called in to testify in response to the revelations published in The Intercept based on leaked social media conversations that while he was leading the Operation Car Wash task force, he and his co-workers actively worked behind the scenes to sabotage the 2018 presidential elections, to jail former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva with no evidence, as they admit in these conversations, deliberately to prevent him from winning the elections. Now, he's testifying in front of the Senate, and he's trying to play the victim card. He's saying that he's the victim of a crime. His conversations were illegally recorded, and that this damages further anti-corruption fighting. This is an ironic claim from a man who spent 5 years illegally recording conversations from the President of Brazil, from former President Lula, and from Lula's defense team, and leaking those things to the media constantly. So it's unclear now whether these revelations will result in Sergio Moro resigning from his justice minister position, but the fact is his reputation is irreversibly damaged, and if he does stay on in this position, it's going to be as a kind of lame duck.
We thank Brian Muir for that report. A damning forensic UN report states that the Saudi crown prince should be investigated over the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. UN extrajudicial executions investigator Agnes Calmard says there is evidence that the Saudi crown prince and other senior officials are liable for the murder of the journalist last October. Riyadh is to respond to the 100-page report which endorses sanctions against Salman until he can provide proof that he has no liability for the journalist's assassination in Istanbul.
What needs to be investigated is the extent to which the Crown Prince knew or should have known of what would have happened to Mr. Khashoggi, whether he directly or indirectly incited the killing, whether he acted without due diligence, whether he could have prevented the execution when the mission started and failed to do so. These are the range of issues which I believe a follow-up criminal investigation should focus on, along with the liability of other individuals.
Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Stefan Dujarric says the report needs to be studied. He added that there ought to be a full and transparent investigation into Khashoggi's murder.
The report was conducted by a special rapporteur who, as you know, and we've said often, are independent of the Secretary General. They are appointed by the Human Rights Council. It's not for the Secretary General to agree or not agree with what the Special Rapporteur reports. There are a couple of recommendations aimed at the Secretary General, as there are recommendations to the Security Council, to individual member states, and I think it's everyone's responsibility to study those recommendations, and they can speak for themselves for the other people who are targeted with recommendations. What is clear for the Secretary General, as he's been saying from the beginning, is that there needs to be a full and transparent investigation. There needs to be accountability for the death of Mr. Khashoggi, as a sign for the protection of journalists, also for his family and for his friends who deserve an answer. As for the Secretary General's authority, I think we've stated again today clearly what the Secretary General believes his authority is in relation to.
The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, arrived in Venezuela on Wednesday. Her visit comes after President Nicolás Maduro extended an official invitation. She will stay in Venezuela until June 21st. Bachelet is set to meet with President Nicolás Maduro as well as with everyday citizens, gripping with the hardships of the economic blockade imposed by the U.S. government. The High Commissioner has previously condemned U.S. sanctions, saying they affect all Venezuelans. The corruption scheme led by opposition lawmaker Juan Guaidó will be investigated by Venezuela's public ministry. The announcement by Venezuela's top prosecutor Tarek William Saab came one day after the country's communications minister revealed the details of the misuse of aid funds by Guaidó's special envoys to Colombia.
The plot in which Venezuelan citizens led by the usurper Guaidó appropriated funds, which were initially meant for assisting Venezuelans who were in the city of Cúcuta, by people named as follows: Rosana Edith Barrera Castillo and Kevin Javier Rojas. These two suspects are the material authors of the acts, but the mastermind is Guaidó. These people falsify receipts to show that they paid for hotels where Venezuelans were staying, of which, according to those hotels, were paid for, according to this claim, by the UN Refugee Agency. Additionally, they inflated the number of supposed Venezuelan military personnel defectors who were in Cúcuta in order to justify the squandering of that money.
Mexico is looking for solutions to the migration crisis on its borders. As such, they are seeking to invest in Central America to encourage people to stay in those countries rather than to migrate north. Speaking in New York, Mexico's Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard announced a jobs creation program for Central America to be launched in El Salvador. Ebrard said similar plans will be announced in Honduras and Guatemala on June 20th. Mexico had been threatened economically by the United States if it didn't act to stem the flow of Central American migrants.
Tomorrow in Tapachula, Chiapas, there will be a meeting between the President of El Salvador, who just took office, and President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, and the comprehensive development plan will start with a program that is called Sowing Life, which will be introduced tomorrow by both leaders. Mexico will contribute resources that will be announced tomorrow of several $1 million. This will start as financing from Mexico. The countries that have already made public their support for the plan include Spain and Germany, and we hope that in the coming days there will be support from other countries.
Additional security forces have been deployed in the north and south of Mexico as part of the government's plan to slow the flow of migrants through Mexico's territory. Critics of the plan see this as the Mexican government acting in the stead of the U.S. government to keep asylum seekers out of the U.S. Let's find out more.
The government has started to implement this plan to curb the migration phenomenon. But this had led to an increased influx of people to the facilities of the Mexican Commission for Refugees, who come to apply for a registration to legally transit across Mexican territory.
If I don't get registered, I will be deported. But by doing this, I will be okay because I am protected by the law.
At the same time, the deployment of thousands of National Guard troops continues at the shores of the Suchiate River, where people who cross from Guatemala into Mexico on a regular basis to purchase goods are not allowed in.
We have many children, and we come to Mexico to buy and to sell goods, so we can feed our children, so we can get by. And now, this government plan is affecting our daily lives.
Checkpoints to check people's IDs are much more visible on the roads of border states and will reportedly be expanded further, as was said by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who said that an ID will be required even to purchase a bus ticket.
We have reliable evidence that a high percentage of irregular migrants travel inside these buses without a proper ID.
Meanwhile, in the northern border, the presence of state police, the military and agents of the National Institute for Migration has also increased. In Ciudad Juárez, in the border with Texas, there has been a significant increase in the number of migrants. Some are waiting for their asylum requests in the U.S. to be approved.
This was the endgame of the Mérida Initiative. It basically proposed that Mexico become a southern police state, and Mexico's southern border would essentially become the United States' southern border, in order to stop the flow of migrants.
Since Thursday, June 13, U.S. authorities are returning a daily average of 200 people back to Mexico. These people then have to acquire a permit to stay in Mexican territory for 180 days, to wait for the U.S. asylum requests, renewing said permit as necessary.
Coming up after the break, we take a look at Labor Day celebrations in Trinidad and Tobago. Stay with us. Welcome back. Less than 1,000 people turned out to mark Labor Day celebrations in Trinidad and Tobago, possibly due to ongoing inclement weather. The smallest crowd in recent years marched in pouring rains in the community of Fisabad. Trinidad and Tobago declared Labor Day an annual national holiday in 1973. It is the anniversary of the 1937 oil fields riots, an anti-colonial revolt led by labor leader Tubal Uriah Bus Butler. Before this, there was tension between workers and employers characterized by worker abuse, underpayment, racism, economic depression, and a fall in living standards of the working class. Back in the 1970s, Butler spoke of the significance of the revolutionary uprising. Let's listen.
The conditions of the poor Indians and Negroes in sugar and oil, respectively, was nothing short of subhuman. It was clearly a case for early rectification. But how to do it?
Representatives from Africa's Intergovernmental Authority on Development trade bloc have met in Ethiopia to discuss the political situation in Sudan. The members are tasked to help find solutions to ensure that a smooth and peaceful transition of power is done in the country.
The challenge before us now is how to encourage the parties to return to negotiation and finalize their discussion on the remaining outstanding issues, with a view to ensuring a smooth and peaceful transition. The Sudanese stakeholders must be called upon to refrain from statements and actions that will escalate tension and spoil conditions necessary for the resumption of talks.
11 African heads of state and more than 1,000 business leaders are meeting in Mozambique for the Africa-U.S. Business Summit. The summit comes as U.S.-based International Development Finance Corporation reportedly planned to invest $60 billion in developmental projects. Speaking at the summit, host and Mozambique's president said the forum is an opportunity to promote enormous potential that African countries offer.
For this reason, I believe that this forum is an excellent opportunity to promote the enormous potential that the country offers, aiming to attract foreign direct investment capable of contributing to the creation of new jobs and wealth generation.
Members of the main opposition party in Malawi have marched to the country's main court seeking an election annulment. Led by opposition leader Lazarus Chakwera, the lawmakers claim the country's May presidential election results had many irregularities. However, an official count showed that Chakwera lost by 159,000 votes. Peter Mutharika of the Democratic Progressive Party was declared the victor with 38.57% of the vote. Tunisia's parliament has passed an amendment to its electoral law, rejecting candidates who benefit from charitable associations or foreign funding during the year before an election. It also includes setting the election threshold to 5% in an attempt to avoid scattered political blocs within the People's Assembly. A candidate in the presidential election says these amendments are an attempt to assassinate Tunisia's democracy. Parliamentary elections are scheduled to take place in October.
This is a very vague law that can be applied case by case. It is unconstitutional. I do not think a judge can agree to apply it. However, I know there is a group in Parliament that will oppose it. We will follow all appeals in calm and lawful manner.
And still in Tunisia, 75 migrants rescued in the Mediterranean Sea after their overcrowded boat capsized are heading back to their homes. They were rescued by fishermen on a tugboat and were then stranded for 2 weeks at the port of Sarsis, where authorities refused to allow the vessel to dock despite an appeal by the boat's captain. But on Wednesday, they finally disembarked after accepting to return home. The UN's High Commissioner for Refugees has announced that developing nations bear the brunt of the world's refugee crisis. Speaking in Berlin, Filippo Grandi said that almost 90% of refugees are not in rich countries.
The figures that you have certainly already seen, the figures that are published in our Global Trends report, are worrying because the total global number of refugees and displaced people, we call displaced people those that are refugees in their own country, basically, so people that have fled from war, persecution, violence, discrimination of various kinds. This number this year has surpassed 70 million, 2 million more than the figure that we announced a year ago. Between 80 and 90% of this 70 million are not in rich countries. They are in poor countries. They are in what we call middle-income countries. In other words, they are in countries that have less resources to address this crisis. Very often, we tend to think of the one big refugee crisis affecting the rich world. This is the perception that many people have, and it is wrong. The statistics tell us another story, that it is very often, unfortunately, a crisis of the poor.
Coming up after the break, Huawei CEO says the company can take the hit from the United States' action against the company. Stay with us. Welcome back. Iran is approaching the date when they will reportedly surpass allowed levels of enriched uranium according to the 2015 nuclear deal. As Western nations call for renewed negotiations of the deal, this is what President Hassan Rouhani had to say about it.
What we have done, despite incorrect portrayals by some countries, is the minimum set of measures Iran can take. We are acting within the agreement, when other parties have either not complied with their obligations or reduced their commitments. From one side, they are putting us under economic pressure, and then they are inviting us to negotiate. This doesn't seem like a very clever move. If you're a diplomat or a smart person, taking part in negotiations under pressure is equivalent to an act of surrender. They use the word negotiation, but surely it only means surrender. If we were to sit down at the negotiating table with the party that is exerting full pressure on the Iranian nation.
Moving on, a Kenyan court has convicted 3 people for helping Somali Islamist fighters carry out an attack on a university that left almost 150 people dead in 2015. Al-Shabaab fighters entered Garissa University in April 2015 with the intention of killing Christian students. The court convicted 2 Kenyans and a Tanzanian man for terrorism-related offenses, but no details were given how the 3 assisted the fighters. They will remain in custody until July, when they will be sentenced. As the United States-China trade war continues, Huawei CEO says the U.S. ban will hit revenue by $30 billion, but that the company can withstand the loss.
If 30 billion is impacted, then we can reach around 100 billion US dollars. And the financial statement by May, I saw that we're still growing at around 20%. We expect to see some slowing of the growth, but we haven't seen that yet. But we are making adjustments internally. So we project there might be a slowdown, but till yesterday's report, I didn't see any slowdown. And we don't know what will be the growth by the end of the year, but we believe the $30 billion will be a very small thing. And we can withstand that. We are not a public company. We don't attach importance to high numbers. We focus on the performance, the quality of the performance.
And now we give you sports updates from around the world.
The group stage is wrapping up in the Women's Football World Cup. The teams in Group D play their final round today. England, Japan, Argentina, and Scotland are all featuring, and there are some things to look out for. Scotland is playing to keep its World Cup alive, with Argentina playing with the same hope. Argentina go into the match in third place, with just a point so far in the group. Japan takes on England, and both teams are in position to advance as they play for the top spot. In the Cricket World Cup, South Africa took on New Zealand. The match was reduced to 49 overs after a wet outfield delayed the start. And cricket fans were left disappointed as Shikhar Dhawan was ruled out of the tournament. Dhawan was in good form and has been India's most consistent performer in the ICC tournaments despite the detection of a hairline fracture. The Africa Cup of Nations will kick off June 21st with the first match between host Egypt and Zimbabwe at the Cairo International Stadium. Egypt is the most successful nation in this competition, winning it a record 7 times since the tournament was founded 62 years ago. Egypt's head coach and captain says during a press conference 2 days before the opening match in Cairo against Zimbabwe.
Playing in the tournament here in Egypt puts pressure on us. All of the players are aware of the situation. We are trying to play normally. We expect many supporters to attend Cairo Stadium, which we haven't played for a very long time now. It is very positive for us to play in the best stadium in the country. This will help us a lot.
I think we have very experienced players in our team. As for the atmosphere, I think we played under the same atmosphere in DRC and in Congo Brazzaville. They are quite used to this kind of atmosphere, and I just hope they're gonna play their normal football and produce a reasonable or good result for the nation.
Brazil has suffered its first setback in the 2019 edition of the Copa America. The hosts drew 0-0 with a willful Venezuela on Tuesday in Salvador. With this result, Brazil and Peru, who beat Bolivia 3-1 in the Maracana in the first game of the second day, lead the group with 4 points. Venezuela are third with 2 and Bolivia are in fourth and are yet to make their mark on the tournament. The third and final group stage games will be played on Saturday, with Brazil versus Peru in Sao Paulo and Bolivia versus Venezuela in Belo Horizonte.
And finally, Trinidad and Tobago brought the sounds of steel pan to Toronto, Canada at the recent Raptor Celebration Parade. The sweet sound of steel took over the mega street party. The display comes ahead of the Toronto Caribbean Carnival, which is only weeks away, scheduled for August 3rd. Revelers will enjoy 4 glorious weeks of Caribbean music and the country's largest festival of freedom and diversity. Here's a taste of things to come. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.